Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the 3x3 Matrix Methodology to Company-Wide IT Maturity and Success. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone that they are on mute and their video is off, but if you would like to ask a question, please use the chat or Q&A feature and our panelists will get your questions answered. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be sent out as well as listed on our YouTube channel. For our agenda today, we'll first introduce our panelists, who will then discuss the overview of methodology before going into IT maturity through partnership and finally ending at business impact. To get started, I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have James Melcher, the Chief Innovation Officer at DYOPATH, as well as Ken Garcia, DYOPATH Senior Director of Sales. And with that, I'll hand it over to you guys.
All right. Well, thank y'all very much for joining us today to go through the 3x3. I'd like to start off by really just keying in on IT maturity levels, because that is a key component of really the 3x3 methodology. And so as we talk about IT maturity levels and understanding, where companies reside, there's 5 key maturity levels. One is, of course, your chaotic state of unpredictable, not really understanding, what's going on, why it's going on. Everything is a fire, right? And then you have reactive, which normally means you have some sense of insight where you're reacting to problems and issues, but really you're not being able to be proactive in nature. Proactive is I have insights, I'm doing things about it, but I really don't have that aligned to anything that would be considered strategic. So you're still allowing some of those reactive things to occur, but you have a proactive way of approaching them, but you don't really have a programmatic or a strategic way to really align that. And then from there, you have service, which is now I'm moving more into what I would consider a programmatic approach of I understand strategically where we're going. I have a plan. We have proactive items in place. We have items that are addressing the reactive items in place, and I have a way to look back and continually improve those. The last phase is really true business alignment, which is value. So from that perspective, the IT maturity for the business or organization really is how now am I driving value back into the organization and not solely being looked at as reactive or really tactical. You're looking at IT from a perspective of how do you help the business drive value? How do you help or enable the business to be more efficient? So those are really just to start the 5 key IT maturity levels. And we'll talk about how those really impact the 3x3 methodology going forward. But I wanted to start with that just to kind of set the baseline.
Hey, James, real quick question on this. Sometimes I guess what I wanted to just add to what you're saying is there's no exact formula, right, that says you're exactly in chaos or you're in reactive, and different parts of IT can be in different areas at the same time. Is that right? Like, for instance, AI right now is sort of a newer technology and might be in the chaotic reactive phase of its life cycle within a business where something else, and I'll let you add to that. I'm sure you got
So what I'll say is it is a stair step, but it does, to Ken's point, it doesn't necessarily mean that all parts are there. So we'll touch on concept like people, process, and technologies a little bit later, but your resourcing plan could be in a chaotic state, but your processes might be a little bit further along, or maybe the technology you're using is way further along, but the people and the processes are not. Certain initiatives around IT, like if you do have service desk, service desk might be in more of a proactive state, but your infrastructure monitoring could be in a more reactive or chaotic state, right? So there are different work streams, I would say, that could reside in different levels for sure. And the goal is to try to align them as close as possible to move them through a maturity model.
Okay. But the more important part, I think, is to have something to measure against, right? So that you can say, where are we today in this area or this with this technology or with this process? Where are we and where do we want to go ultimately, so that so you don't go in the wrong order, right? I mean, because you could, if you might not be ready, right? Essentially for some of these things too, because they're foundational and they build upon each other. Is that accurate?
That is definitely accurate. The goal is to instill a model that helps you drive IT maturity, right? So, and to progress through these stages, you're going to have different components that reside in these different levels for sure, to Ken's point. But the goal is, how do I continually progress through IT maturity? And as things age, I will say, like technology ages or changes or evolves, you might find yourself back in a chaotic state in pushing that same technology or initiatives through the model. So,
Got it. Thanks.
cool. And so just to touch on IT maturity and why it's really important to have to understand what the model is, and understanding why progressing through it is such an advantage for organizations. So just to use two case studies, Forrester reports are really talks about, creating IT maturity within an organization and a plan to efficiently deploy it, that the efficiencies given are being able to be achieved are in the range of 20 to 30%, right? So really what does that mean? If you're able to progress through a maturity model, you're able to see benefits of 20 to 30%, based on the Forrester data. Same for Gartner. If you're looking at, how can I progress through from their data points, is 15 to 25%. So, when you look at these things could be people, these could be processes, these could be technologies, this could be automations. It really just depends. But the ultimate goal and really the data point here is in putting in an IT maturity model, following through that model, trying to refine the organization, you can yield, roughly between 20 to 25% based on, their models. Now, or their statistics, but when you really start looking at other things, like, let's get a little bit more granular of what does that really mean? Things like implementing ITIL within an organization, which is a standard for service management, being able to really execute on some of those base practices, like I'm going to implement incident management. So I have a way to capture incidents within the organization. I have a way to address those incidents within the organization. I know how to categorize those incidents as well, and I can trend on them, right? So just implementing certain insights and data or insights like that is critical. You have different components of it, which are problem management, which give you even a greater sense or visibility into that. And then basic things like change management and asset management, which open up even greater insights into what is going on with the organization. How do you process those things? So, just by implementing some of those things, organizations see roughly to 20 to 40% increase really in service management processes and overall operations, which that's pretty significant. But that is a major kind of a stair step from being reactive to being proactive, right? And that's something ITIL is really a critical component of being able to move into that proactive state and those later stages as well. The other major thing is really around automations, and everybody, I hate to say it's kind of a buzzword. A lot of people are saying automation, or RPA and things like that, but it is a critical piece to IT maturity. But you have to be mature enough or at a certain level to even take advantage of automation. So you need to understand what you're trying to achieve. You need to understand the requirements. You also need to understand what are the processes in place in general that you're trying to automate, because a bad process or a lack of detail of a process, you're going to automate a bad process. So, but if you're able to progress through a maturity model and develop out what those processes are, then you can really start to take advantage of automation and really see the benefits of 20 to 50%. And in some industries, that are heavily dependent on manual processes, there's as much as 75% out in the market associated with automation. But really it starts with understanding, how do I get out of that chaotic state? how do I understand and get more insights into reactive? Ultimately, how do I become more proactive and I understand what those really what those processes are? Then you really can start capturing some major benefits out of automation. So, but those are just some of the really data points we wanted to talk to about why is it important? What can you yield out of really following an IT maturity model itself?
So James, it
Can
sounds like it's worth pursuing, right? The bottom line, there's enough data to support that chasing, maturing your IT process absolutely has returns that are anywhere, based on the slide, from 20 to 50%. So, or 15 to 50%. So definitely worth pursuing and investing time, because it's not just, you don't flip a switch, right? This is a journey. This is something that continuously happens, right? IT maturing, and you're always maturing your IT different areas. So, but if it's worth 15 to 50% return, I think that those are real numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and on the conservative side, maybe 30%, right? If you take the average of all of those type of things, roughly. I think the other aspect of it too, Ken, I think it's critical to really IT maturity is your business. Your business is always going to evolve. The market is always going to change. So your business itself needs to mature. So your business is going through a maturity model in a way, as well as you revamp services and what you're doing and refining that. So just inherently, IT needs to mature along the business as well. So instilling a model to be able to do that, to keep up with the pace of your business and the growth strategies there, definitely very critical.
And I think we see a lot of businesses and just technology departments struggling with this, and just the concept, right? They know they want to improve, they know they want to get better, they want to drive efficiencies, they want to drive automation, but the demands of the technology and the support and resource or lack of resources, you need to be really intentional with this, right? I mean, that's what I see on the IT maturity model, is it allows you to put something so you can measure, and things that get measured get addressed. And so that's just sort of my thought when I look at this, and just saying, you want to get to these outcomes, or you want to get a return, but you need a methodology to get there. So I think that's really
Yeah,
where you went with this when you were looking at the 3x3, right?
correct. Yeah, 100%. There needs to be structure, and there needs to be structure at multiple levels to achieve true IT maturity. So, as Ken stated on where we went with 3x3, the 3x3 methodology really is a visualization, is really a visual, and I'll show that in the next slide. It's really a structured approach to understand, how do I get through IT maturity, and then in all honesty, what are those steps that I can take to get there? What is it, what are the outcomes associated with that as well? And our goal is to show a visual that it really helps individuals understand at a simplistic view of, this is what I need to do, and here's what needs to be done, and then also to that point of, here's where it impacts as well. So we will get more into kind of the 3x3 methodology here in the next few slides, but I just wanted to kind of set up to understand, what's the point of the visual? What is it really trying to drive? So 3x3 methodology really for IT maturity in its simplistic form is assessing where you're at today. So most organizations, yes, they might be in a chaotic state. Majority actually reside between I would say, semi-proactive, in a little bit in the chaotic state, right? And again, as Ken stated earlier, not all work streams might be in those states, but if you kind of take the average, that's really where they tend to live. So the first thing that you have to do is really assess. So that top box is assessing the environment of where you're at today to really get a good understanding of what the current state is. You need to understand that current state to really align to where you're going. So, next box to the right of that is you have to analyze the data that you've obtained to really start to put together a plan to say, how do I address those deficiencies to move me through an IT maturity model? So I need to be able to move through a proactive state. Well, you need to understand, why are you in chaos? What type of data do you need to be capturing? Really, then from there is, how do I put together a plan, and what is that plan really need to do? So the outcome of those plans really start to be, I need to stabilize my environment as one. So you need to address, stabilization. I need to remove all of the ad hoc type issues that are coming up, or any of the alerts. So that could be really putting eyes and ears on, monitoring tools and things like that in place. It could be numerous things, but then from there, it's okay. We really need to address a bigger issue: is, are we not stable because we're not standardizing? So we don't have standard processes. We don't have standard hardware. We don't have standard tool sets and those type of things. So really, that is a massive thing that comes into play, because a lot of organizations, as they grow, one of the biggest things they do is they don't implement standards. So standard processes, standard technologies, or even, and when I mean technologies, I have 30 different types of Windows devices, hardware. I have different networking equipment. And now what you've pretty much done is you've created, a 2 to 3 to 4x issue by supporting different standards, which contributes to your chaos. So that's a massive thing that needs to be addressed to help stabilize as well. The other aspect of that is, as you grow through the organization and you are stabilizing, you are standardizing, you have to take security into play. And in all honesty, it's securing those environments. So as you mature and as the business starts to ask for more from IT, you really have to take things in consideration of, how do I secure the data as I mature? How do I secure the technology? How do I secure the processes, the procedures, those type of things? And what people don't realize is, you don't want exposure to those things to get out, because those are critical components about your environment as well. So as you go through these stages of, assess, analyze, address, to stabilize, to standardize, to secure, really what you're starting to do is mature your people, your process, and your tools that you have, in creating more of a programmatic approach of how to manage the overall IT organization itself. Ultimately, what that helps do is aligned to the business, and we'll touch on that a little bit in another slide. But that's really what I wanted to set up from this is the 3x3 methodology. Why is it critical to your organization? And really, what is it, the visual trying to show and say, how do we go about IT maturity?
Hey, James, can you
Yep.
give a couple examples? Because I think it's really important. I know you're going to talk a little bit about the business alignment, but just to give the audience some understanding, when we're assessing, because I think a lot of people think of it just strictly through a technical lens, and they're assessing the environment, and they're looking more at speeds and feeds and maybe technical requirements, and sometimes they miss the business requirements that often dictate the technical requirements. Can you sort of explain that, like, how you would go about doing that, or your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So for IT maturity in general, I would say you're exactly right. You have to not just assess technology from how it operates, right? People, process, tools, technologies, but it's, why is it even there in the first place? So from that perspective, you need to understand what the business is doing. And I like to say, you follow the dollar, and others in the organization say that as well, is you need to understand how the organization is actually generating revenue. What are those key components of that business? So how do the users in different departments contribute to the business um, generating revenue, right? And what their goals are as well. And then from there, what are the department's requirements associated with that? So now you start getting into the technology that supports the individuals, but if you don't understand truly, what is the purpose that that technology is there? How does it align to the business? What is the business trying to what is the business trying to do? It's extremely hard to mature an environment. Really, what you start to do is mature an environment in a different direction than what the business is really trying to go. So it's very critical to start maturity, IT maturity, from understanding what your business is doing. How do they generate revenue? What are their goals? That clearly aligns. Why is IT in place? What is the purpose of it? There's other things that need to be assessed, like I would say regulatory compliance for the industry that you're in is super critical as well, because that could also drive process, people, and technologies that you have. And those things could be dictated to the business. So those are things that definitely have to be assessed and then analyzed, and then ultimately a plan to address those type of items.
Got it. Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, not a problem. So I'll move on to just really some of the outcomes, and we touched on a little bit of them when we talked about the why the 3x3 and how does it, really, this is really how does it build outcomes. So the focus is, as we stated, is to assess, analyze, address, stabilize, standardize, and secure. But the reason those are the focus is really for these outcomes is you have to provide what we would say is resource clarity. So from a people perspective, by going through that process, you have to have a clear understanding of what your people are doing. It could be your staff, it could be contractors, it could be outsourced individuals, it could be a managed service provider. But regardless of that, you have to understand, and what this really needs to drive out is clarity on what those resources and those individuals are doing. So maturing your environment means you're creating clear roles for those functions in the organization, or really in IT, to mature. The other thing is we touched on too is when we start talking about stabilize and standardizing, from a people perspective, there has to be performance metrics that individuals meet in the organizations, measurables that could be tracked for success, and those type of things really need to be monitored and managed, right, as well. And some of them could be how quick do you pick up the calls, things like that, how quick things are being resolved from a people perspective, right? The other components of that are just enhanced communication. So as well as you're going through this maturity state, you are also enhancing the communication internally as well as externally as needed. So those are things that really are outcomes from the 3x3 as well. And when you start to jump into the process piece of it, it's really big things that need to occur from a process is really the business alignment. So as you're maturing, the outcome is to really provide a well thought out business process alignment, a gap analysis that really shows where you're currently at today. So where you reside might be in that chaotic state, but the goal is to show where you're at, measure to that, and where you need to go. And then some of the other major things is really performance metrics. Do you have the processes and procedures in place to really monitor, to measure those type of metrics? The other one is, do you have processes in place for risk? So when you start talking about ITIL standards, as we did, and being able to gain 20 to 40% or even up to 50% efficiency in some of the instances, really, this is where IT service management process standards come into play, of really being able to drive that efficiency out. So this is a major outcome of where you could utilize ITIL to drive process improvement through the IT organization. And then lastly, on purpose really is tools, right? So tools are enablers, and really being able to drive this is understanding, again, business process all the way to value is really what are the tools that we're using? How can we be more efficient in those tools? So really, it's driving better technology utilization, ensuring that the technology being used aligns with the business or actually enables the business. It is not hindering the business. I know in some instances, individuals look at security tools and things like that, and they're like, this hinders our productivity. There's a balance. There's a fine line between that needs to occur. But then ultimately also from a tools perspective is just how effective and efficient are they? That's a process that also needs to be always reviewed or optimized are the tools that we're using today really driving the efficiencies that we need? And there needs to be a structured and standard process to evaluate them to either keep either keep them, kill them, or migrate to something else. The other major thing is just as through really the evaluation of tools is the integration and interoperability of them. So one of the biggest things as you move through an IT maturity model is the evolution of the tools need to integrate with more. They need to be able to pass data more efficiently. And ultimately, as they move into these different stages, they need to be able to grow. So a lot of people, what you'll see is these tools, when you start in the chaotic state, get aged out or they get killed because they don't integrate. They don't have any interoperability. They cannot share data. They are basically silos, or they are just not living up to the requirements of the business. So this is another major outcome, right? And we kind of touched on scalability with that comment as well. The other piece of it is just, I would say, risk is really around risk. So are these tools presenting any type of risk to the organization? So a lot of people don't evaluate their tools fully. So when you're in that chaotic state, you're buying something and trying to put something in because it is chaos and it meeting the need. Well, what you find out is your data might be being shipped off somewhere else, or it's not really backed up, or it doesn't have a DR plan associated with it, but your data is extremely critical. So those are some of the risk factors that get driven out when you look at driving through this process of assessing and analyzing and such. Those are some of the major things, and that really kind of goes into future proofing as well, of looking at it of the life cycle of what the tool or application is, and saying, well, is this going to meet our needs in the future? But you have to put in a standard process. That's why I use the term programmatic approach, is really having a program and a standard process in place to fully vet these tools as well, and making sure that they ultimately will align to your business and continue to align to your business.
Hey, James, can you,
Yep.
as you were talking about all of that, and I
Yep.
think about technology pre-COVID and post-COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and I think about the process that was in place prior to COVID, and I'll say it felt like there was a lot more diligence involved in getting or procuring a tool. Like there was more I
Structure.
think of more structure, a more thorough analysis of purchasing some of those technologies. And then I felt like pandemic hits and departments, individuals, the company, people were all buying tools to try to solve and keep business going. And I would say that was a very chaotic state. But a lot of those technologies are still in place today, which is good and bad potentially. Can you talk through, the how the 3x3 applies to that and some of the steps that we're walking our clients through, and other customers might want to start thinking about in their mind of how do they clean some of that up to get to the place, because I feel like it all translates to potential risk or unknown risk.
Yeah, great, great example, right, of COVID, and really, here's what I say occurred. I love to use the term ideation to implementation. And when COVID hit, what you saw was a massive reaction to an issue, which was warranted. You had remote workforce that needed to be deployed immediately. Because of that, it just perpetuated issues throughout the business, right? Well, how do I do this business function now if I don't have people there, or all kinds of things? So what occurred is um, a lot of the, I would say, standards or standard processes went out the door and went from ideation to execution. A lot of companies did not go back to a standard process. So their new norm became ideation to implementation or ideation to execution. And because of that, it caused a major issue. So to your point, when you start talking about those type of things, organizations need to put back in place a way to identify your requirements, assess where you're at, identify and truly define what your requirements are, and then a plan to address those, right? So using the 3x3 methodology is a perfect example. It's how you go back and put structure in place to take advantage of the technologies that are out there, right? To streamline people and process. One of the great examples of that is people say, well, if you put structure in place, you move too slow. Well, in reality, this is what occurs. When you don't put structure in place, you do work, you redo the work, you go back and you redo the work again, right? And you don't really evolve, you just have constant traction of progress, not even progress, but really of just constant activity. So when you put a structure in place of, this is what we need to strive to, what you're able to do is really understand where you came from, understand clearly what needs to be executed on, and you have a plan and really a life cycle to drive initiatives through. Your gains from that are leapfrogs, right? They are significant jumps versus a constant churn of activity, which doesn't really get you to where you want to as fast as you think. It just feels like you are, but you aren't. And it is not a repeatable process. The only repeatable process associated with that is just continual work. So that is what we noticed coming out of COVID. Really, a lot of organizations just got into this vicious cycle of ideation to execution or implementation. 3x3 helps you standardize that, put structure around that, and really helps you drive true IT maturity and alignment to the business.
So James, I'm going to ask you just to expand or look at it from another angle, which is once you've done all of this, how do you keep it in line so you don't end up repeating the same things that have happened in the past, right? How do you learn from it to avoid it down the road? What's that process look like?
Yeah, so I will say that's the tail end of IT maturity when you start to have value. So when you hit that value stage, the value stage is now that you have a continuous improvement process, not just within the IT organization. It's really a continuous improvement process with the business. So that means having steering committees, IT steering committees. It means reviewing the business objectives either on a quarterly basis or twice a year, ensuring that you have alignment with the business as well, right? And it also means IT does need, we like to say, a seat at the table, to really drive some of these initiatives and really align with the business, right? Having that continuous improvement process and those type of things in place, it creates a life cycle. You're constantly measuring how you're doing. You're constantly measuring where you're going and are you able to meet that and continue to meet that. That's really getting to the value state now. The values phase is because at a value phase, IT gets brought in at a different state of what the business wants to achieve. Are we aligning to it? Can we do that? How fast can we do it? They're brought in and really you're starting to kind of, I would say, optimize at that point in time. through those different committees, and you have a process to say, we have a new initiative, we need to assess it, we need to analyze it, and this is how we actually drive IT maturity. Very similar to like a software development lifecycle or any type of structured program built around continuous improvement.
Got it. Thanks.
Yep. With that being said, I'm going to hand over the next section over to Ken around IT maturity through our partnership.
All right, James, thanks. So, one of the things that we look at as a service provider is, how do we take best practices? How do we actually take our clients through a journey to get them to where they want to end up? And what we have found is through partnership, we can accelerate and get the outcomes faster. And what I mean by that is clients, I'm just going to say, bringing the whole organization through IT maturity and getting it to a value-driven state is a big effort. And, I would say the key focus goes back to the follow the dollar, or where's the money coming in, or where's the revenue potentially at risk. Clients can get wrapped around the axle focusing on technology and IT maturity. They can look at it through the wrong lens. And what I think makes a lot of sense is partnering potentially with an MSP like ourselves that took the time to already build the process out from an IT maturity perspective, and shifting some of the responsibility. I can't say all the responsibility because it is a partnership, but looking at the resources that you have in-house today that really understand how the business makes money, where the challenges really are, and brings that lens to the table, and then brings an organization like DYOPATH and our products and services that are already mapped to IT maturity to really focus on driving conversations to move, I like to say, up and to the right, move up the maturity, drive up the value, and accelerate it. So, when we were designing our products and services, and one of the things we want to introduce to the market through this webinar is one of our product offerings called DYOSphere. And earlier this year, we released a security product portfolio called DYOGuard, and that was really designed for security. And now we've introduced DYOSphere, and the focus is really driving service management and using service management to drive IT maturity, and having a really strong partnership with our clients to focus on where they want to go from a business. So really, when we look at a partnership and working with clients, we move them away from the people management portion, the process management portion, the tool selection portion, which are full-time jobs. And we get them focused back on business and driving business value and allowing us to take care of those other initiatives. So I like to say IT maturity comes as a pull-through through our partnership, because we're built, and the 3x3 methodology that we're sort of covering, we went through as we approached and designed our products and services. So clients instantly through our partnership get this. And James, let's just talk through a couple things, because I think it's important when we're going through, assessing and analyzing and addressing and standardizing and stabilizing things. There is a process that we go through. First of all, it's onboarding, right? Taking that client through that onboarding, doing the discovery, and doing the assessment, and really understanding what's what, right? That's the first part. And so once we have that, I would say that that's more of the physical inventory, the enterprise inventory list essentially. But it gives you an opportunity to assess the business and how those all tie together. Can you talk through that process a little bit, James, and just walk through how just engaging with us to come on as a new customer drives you through some of this.
Yeah, and I'll touch on the point of the pull through, right, component you stated. So at the end of the day, a standard onboarding process, and I would say most people look at it as solely, what do I need to capture to onboard? But in reality, what it really should be, and really what it will be with Diosphere is, it is assessing the current state. It is capturing some of that same type of data that is needed to bring on, to really to have this service. The other aspect of it is what it's doing is really assessing the maturity of the organization through where your processes and procedures stand today. So you might onboard, the data gets captured, the processes get captured, but then what quickly gets identified are also the deficiencies associated with maybe processes and procedures, because the way to drive down the amount of incidents and other things like that could be, we are going to activate a self-service portal to address these 5 to 10 processes that were identified are critical to the organization that are really not in place today. They're being manual. So as you look at that, and I would say through the Diosphere, using Diosphere as an example, it's the onboarding is a semi-assessment. The analyzing occurs really as we get you onto a service and start to see, things through incident, problem, and change, and those type of things. Then how do we address them? Because some of these might just not be sustainable. And really what you need to start thinking about then is, okay, we're seeing that because of the standardization issues with equipment and other things, we need to put a plan in place to address that, which we know then will drive down support issues within the organization and things like that. Other things like that is it's going to make it difficult to easily secure the environment without a lot of standards. So if you look at, Diosphere is we're able to help build the processes, we're able to help automate the processes through self-service portals. We're able to meet with you on quarterly basis and things like that to really start to have those discussions of how do we mature through there. And then through different individuals, account managers and others, we're able to have conversations of what needs to happen next to continue to move forward, right? It could be bringing up the secure component and introducing, DioGuard as here is a security offering that we saw through this process is an issue, and this really needs to be addressed. So, Ken, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So
Mhm.
let's talk about, go to the next one. And so, as we were looking at how do we partner with our clients as efficiently as possible to drive IT maturity to improve their business outcomes, what we realized is we did have 2 tracks really that we needed to focus on. And we introduced DioGuard, as I said earlier, this year, really focused on cybersecurity. And a lot of clients just needed a really solid pathway to increase their security posture or measure against their security posture with the best practice framework. And so our DioGuard offering was sort of purpose built for that. Then we looked at it from a service management. How do we actually drive the changes that are bigger and outside of just security? How do we take a step back and look at it more from a holistic perspective? And what we came up with is Diosphere. And really it's a new product offering. We're starting to talk about it now to the market. And where we're going with this ultimately is a new product offering. So I'm just introducing the concept. It's not here yet, but it is being built out, and that's our DYOPATH 1 product offering, which will bring both of these combined to create a unified fabric to be able to take care of both of these and fully help our clients move the IT maturity needle very quickly and very purpose built for their either industry or vertical or business outcome focus. So we're continuing to expand our portfolio. Today, I want to talk a little bit about DYOPATH and how we approached it. Would you mind going to the next one, James?
Yeah,
So
and can I add one item
yes, please.
to that? So really from a DYOPATH 1 perspective, I don't want to say we're trying to we're not creating an easy button, but really the biggest efficiency in the market that we see is the two pillars or different silos from cybersecurity and services management, and people are not aligning those together efficiently with business, really where the business is going. So the vision with DYOPATH 1 is a singular program that has different kind of subcomponents being cybersecurity and service management. And the reason for this is also as cybersecurity services, and I'll use this great example of patch management and vulnerability management could reside in either independently. But in reality, an organization doesn't care that a provider sells it one way or another, or a program IT handles, traditional IT just handles patch management, but cybersecurity handles vulnerability management. In all reality, it needs to be one. And that's just one example of services in IT management or IT maturity that will continue to blend together as technology progresses, and especially with AI, will start to really knock down a lot of the different barriers. So our view is there needs to be one methodology, one path that that people can take, and really that's the purpose of DYOPATH 1 with the DYOGuard and DYOSphere and other future services to be released.
Thanks, James.
Mm-hmm.
So as we looked at DYOSphere and we aligned it to IT maturity and we started building it out, one of the challenges, and I mentioned it earlier, each client has sort of a different journey, right? And so we're a guide helping clients go through this. But one of the key elements, I think, in any partnership with the client is the ability to meet them where they're at. And so, James, if you can go to the next slide, it gives a little bit of an example of how we've mapped the solution to clients and their different IT maturity levels. And so this is just to introduce the concept that we have the ability to partner, because some customers are like, hey, you may be too mature for our organization and we're not ready for what you may need. We have the ability to align to meet the clients where they're at. And so when we look at it, we have different core offerings on the bottom, or different offerings, I should say, levels. And they map right above. So somebody that may be in a chaotic reactive state may need to start with a DYOSphere core product offering, which is a foundational building block. Somebody else may already have an MSP and they may have outgrown their MSP, and they may come to us and say, hey, my current MSP, they're not moving the needle. Everything is just sort of status quo. We're not addressing the actual business challenges that I have. And we're very proactive, but we're not driving the value and services that we need to the organization. So, they often would come in at an advanced level, and then we're going to work to move them to that pro level. And then we do have some clients that are very mature in their technologies, and they are constantly looking to move to the next level to drive more value. And it is the highest level, right? Our advanced pro, and it has the most services around it. But it is a journey that never ends. So, the framework that we've built with the solution really allows that relationship to continue to mature and grow. And really the focus is continuous improvement. And every time we're looking through the lens of continuous improvement, we're finding new efficiencies, we're finding ways to transform, we're finding ways to question why we're doing something, and we're always pushing that next level to improve, bottom line. And so, I just wanted to share with our audience, sort of how we've aligned to make it flexible, Because when you look at that 3x3, there's a lot going on there, and we just want to make sure that we're able to help our clients where they're at today. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, unless you want to add anything else, James.
No, I'll go to the next slide.
All right. So the other part I just wanted to leave the audience with is the components that fill into Diosphere so that they understand. We looked at it from really three perspectives as far as helping do the 3x3 execution, if you will. So there's the end user services, and when we look at it from that perspective, it's all your users, right? And you think about all the technology that they're using today, they need more help than ever. And when things don't work, it definitely slows the production or the productivity, I should say. Then we look at all of the core infrastructure that all those end users are actually reaching out to or connecting to some way, somehow. And cloud is obviously a big portion of that in today's environment, but we have services that address that. And then really, I would say this is where your guides for IT maturity start coming in, is that client management aspect and really being able to work with our clients to define where they want the business to go, or what challenges they want to address, or what their top three priorities are, and how we can leverage our expertise and technology to help achieve those. And just a real quick note on technology. Technology, everybody thinks there has to be high tech. Sometimes technology is a process, right? Sometimes it's just changing the way you do something and doing it more efficiently. So, when we look at it from a programmatic approach, we are looking at it at all three areas of the people, process, and tools. So we are looking at it from a holistic and really trying to drive the outcomes that our clients are looking at. So those are the core components. And if anybody's interested in learning more about Diosphere, we're here to help. If you want to do this on your own, we're here to help as well. What's the next slide, James? This is the one that matters, right? The actual impact.
Yeah.
Why don't you use this as an opportunity to bring it all together and talk through, if people actually go through this process on their own,
Yep.
or with us as their guide, what do they have what do they have
Yeah.
to look forward to?
Yeah. So really the impact on the business, right? So IT maturity is great because it enables and aligns the business, or aligns IT to the business. The 3x3 methodology gives you that framework and that standard to do it. But at the end of the day, what I like to say, DYOPATH's difference in the way we look at things is, yes, we want to mature the IT and help the organization do that. We want to prioritize things like stability, standardization, and security for those organizations to be able to grow. We want to be able to also focus on making sure that the IT organization, as well as the business, ultimately is innovating, right? So getting to that value state allows an organization to innovate. Service management really can only innovate so far, but in all reality, the true alignment between the business and IT gives the organization the ability to truly innovate, right, and stay aligned. It creates a competitive advantage for that organization as well. So if you have a close-knit IT organization with the business, and you're innovating, you have a competitive advantage over your organization. You can start using some of the process, the procedures, the technologies. I'll give you a great example of security is a great one. A lot of organizations now question a business's, really maturity, because how mature is your security? How well are you going to keep my data, protect my data? How well are you going to ensure that the data that I give you does not get leaked, right? So showing that you have a mature or robust organization or IT organization with mature security procedures and services is a great way. And even when you bolt on things like governance, regulatory compliance components to that, you can really prove it, as well. So those are some of the major competitive advantages where IT can come into play. Also, the other aspect of it too is just being able to really enable company growth, being more efficient, and then aligning to the corporate goals. Now, the piece I like to say really is IT maturity is not all about SLAs and KPIs and any of those things. So the difference is this. A service provider or managed service provider should be focused on giving back productivity hours to the organization. So what that means is streamlining process procedures and getting people to the most efficient, service management as possible, so that their organization is not spending time dealing with IT on reactive things, but instead partnering with IT on moving the organization forward. So using some of the examples that we stated before about being able to increase productivity gain, by 20%, 30% or such. If you just look at, say the average US salary for an individual, that's in the organization, $30 per hour, maybe. The 5% productivity gain is like 104 hours per year per employee. So if you look at that times the number of employees, that could be as much as like $3,100 in productivity gains given back to the organization. That means that person has more time to focus on their job and really provide productivity back to the organization versus sitting in this chaotic and non-proactive state and messing around with IT, right? So that's the difference. Is the goal is to give back productivity to the organization, to streamline process procedures, to really enable the business to grow at a more rapid pace through structure. You cannot do that if you're solely focused on standard SLAs and KPIs. We needs to be focused on efficient processes, procedures, and standards to give back to the organization. And so with that said, that's really the purpose of the 3x3 model, is to show how you could traverse through an IT maturity model in a more simplistic way, but also how you could do it and even accelerate it further is through, through services like DYOSphere or DYOGuard, which accelerate you through those things versus trying to build those yourself. So, all right. Go ahead, Kenny.
I was going to say, just, from a time perspective, I think we're there. If there are any questions that anybody has, drop them in the Charlie. How are we taking those in Q&A?
Yes, you can use the Q&A feature for this.
Got it. Okay.
But we do have a question right here. What are the key indicators that an organization is transitioning from one IT maturity level to the next?
James,
yeah, I'll take that one. So I will say there are some, just based on what I've seen, is business demand is one of the indicators. Honestly, if you have, and what we've seen is, if the business is constantly asking different things and different initiatives IT, that means that the current state or requirements normally are not being met, right? So there is a misalignment there. When you start seeing things like regulatory compliance coming down and saying, hey, IT, I need to do this, I need to do this, you're getting pulled through IT maturity versus driving IT maturity. When data insights and things like, hey, I need this data, but I need a synopsis of like what occurred over the last 3 to 6 months. Well, you're being pulled through data maturity then, or IT maturity then at that point in time, because of those type of things. So if you're being asked new type of requirements for how do we do X, what is our trending for this, can you give me reports on this, and how often do we keep them? The reality of the situation is those are indicators that you are now being pulled through IT maturity. You are not proactively going through that process.
Thanks, James.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for that. And for the sake of time, for any other questions that we have, if you have one, please feel free to reach out to both James at james.melcher@diopath.com and Ken at ken.garcia@diopath.com. And so we want to thank you for joining our webinar today. A recording will be sent out and also listed on our YouTube channel. If you'd like to attend any of our additional roundtables or webinars, they're listed on our events page on diopath.com, as well as our YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thanks, guys.